Okay, so I would now like to introduce Jill Kelly. She'll be continuing on with the presentation tonight. And then, Jill, I'm sure you're going to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and help us get to learn about what you do day to day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, everybody who called in to hear me speak. I'm very flattered that you want to hear about what a hearing itinerant teacher does, and I'm happy to tell you all about my job. So I'm going to switch to the next slide. So just so you know, the first slide says that this call for all will discuss the roles and responsibilities of a hearing itinerant teacher, presented by me. I have 25 years of experience working with deaf and hard of hearing students of varying ages, and this presentation, as you know, is today, January 25th at 8:30, and I definitely will leave time at the end for you to ask individual or specific questions. I also have many links to share with you. I did put a cute little, if you're looking at the PowerPoint, I don't know if you realize, I love sharing this little picture. The word listen and the word silent, I don't know if you realize that those are made up of all exactly the same letters. They're spelled with the same letters. I thought that's kind of an interesting fact. Moving to the next slide. And before I say anything else, actually, I did want to say that if you hear me say the phrase hearing impairment or hearing loss throughout my presentation, if it's not terminology that you yourself use, just please feel free to think of whatever word you might categorize your students or your nieces or your own children or whoever you're thinking about as I'm speaking. If you prefer hearing loss over hearing impairment, or if you like deaf or you like hard of hearing, just use those phrases interchangeably. I'm just addressing all degrees and terms related to hearing loss throughout this presentation, so I just wanted to mention that. So the next slide says a little bit about me, so that's what I look like. The picture in the bottom left corner I took recently at Illinois State University. The picture in the green shirt is me many, many years ago when I was teaching a sign language class, and the other picture there is with Rachel Coleman, who does the signing time videos. So that's, think about maybe 4 years ago, 3 years ago I met her. So that's me. But a little bit more specifically about me besides what I look like. I did graduate from Illinois State University in 1991 with a bachelor's in special education, specifically deaf and hard of hearing. I also have a regular teaching certificate. I have the special education teaching certificate. I have an early childhood approval as well. I am also a sign language instructor. I've been doing so since 1990. I'm also an interpreter. I've been doing so since 1989. A little more personal about me, I do have 3 children of my own. They are all in high school. My youngest does have significant special needs. And in February, I will begin taking classes. I decided recently I would like to obtain a master's in early childhood education, so I'm going to be doing so starting February 22nd. So not sure how I'm going to fit that all in, but I will make it happen. The next slide tells a little bit more about me. I have 25 years experience working with deaf and hard of hearing students. I did start in the self-contained setting, so I do have many years experience just driving to one school and staying there all day long. But since 2006, I've been a hearing itinerant teacher. In other words, you can call that a traveling teacher. I did work in Naperville District 203 from 2006 to 2013. I'm currently employed by Huntley School District 158. And one more fact about me, I've been on the Illinois Hands and Voices board since 2010. I found a little picture there. Many kids call me the hearing aid teacher. So I did find a funny little picture that said that. The next slide. So my district asked me to write a mission statement, and so this is what I would consider my mission statement for all the students that I work with. And my students range in age from early childhood through a senior in high school. But really all of them, this is kind of my goal for them. Students who are deaf or hard of hearing will learn to advocate for their hearing loss, meet their individual goals, and participate within their school to achieve their highest potential so they are successful, independent students. So that was my personal mission statement, and the district liked it, so they made that the mission statement on their webpage under Hearing Itinerant. So that's about all I'm going to say about that. The next slide. So really, you have to have a hearing loss to qualify to be on my caseload. And so I made the next slide and I called it, what is a hearing impairment? So a hearing impairment is defined by the is defined by the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, as, quote, an impairment in hearing, whether permanent or fluctuating, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So a student may be identified as hearing impaired if an unaided hearing loss of 25 plus decibels is present that makes the acquisition of receptive and expressive language skills difficult. A hearing loss of 25 decibels or less with or without amplification is considered within the normal hearing limits. So I know it's not very big, the picture that I put in there, but if you can see the very top light blue area where it's 25 dBs and higher, that's all within the normal range. And if you have normal hearing, I really cannot put you on my caseload. I did recently attend a meeting where they suspected a hearing loss for a little one who was 3 years old. And after doing some hearing testing and various other testings, we found she just didn't have a hearing loss. And although Mom was super excited about me working with her daughter, and I definitely could have helped her. She was quite delayed in many different areas. She doesn't have a hearing loss. I really cannot service her or put her on my caseload. So you've got to kind of be in that green area or below and have a hearing loss of 20 dBs or higher, and makes it, that the educational performance is being compromised. Next slide. The most common categories of hearing loss, you usually will hear mild hearing loss, moderate hearing loss, severe hearing loss, or profound hearing loss. There are two general categories of hearing loss, sensory neural and conductive. Sensory neural occurs when there's damage to the inner ear or the auditory nerve. This type of hearing loss is usually permanent. Or a conductive hearing loss, that occurs when sound waves cannot reach the inner ear. The case may be earwax buildup, could be a fluid issue, could be a punctured eardrum. Medical treatment or surgery can usually restore a conductive hearing loss, but not always. I have children on my caseload with sensory neural hearing loss and conductive loss. You can also have a mixed loss. So those students are, of the 33 students that I see, some have sensory neural and some have conductive. Some also have unilateral hearing loss. That means one side or single-sided deafness, or maybe one ear is profound or some type of a hearing loss and the other side has normal hearing. I have students like that on my caseload as well. Next slide. So what is a hearing itinerant teacher? And that's a picture of my, it's actually the sign right on my door there, room 310, hearing itinerant. The hearing itinerant teacher serves students who require educational services due to a hearing impairment. They travel to multiple buildings to directly serve students and collaboratively works with staff to monitor the impact the hearing loss may have on the student's educational process. They act as a link between the school and family of the deaf or hard of hearing child. So basically I travel from school to school. So I don't work for a co-op. Several other hearing itinerant teachers do. I work just for one direct school district. and my district has 9 different schools, so I actually attend all 9 schools. I do have an office at one certain school where I happen to have the most students, but I am in my car frequently driving from school to school to school. So I definitely travel, and I see students, like I said earlier, from early childhood, age 3, up until a senior in high school. I think specifically I do not have any 8th graders, and I do not have any kindergarteners. But I have all the other grades in between EC and 12. So that kind of describes what a hearing itinerant teacher is. The next screen tells a little bit more. That's a picture of a sign that I took when I used to work in District 203. They used to have signs so that because we traveled so much, we kind of had some preferential parking. So that's a picture of the sign. So still, again, what is a hearing itinerant teacher? I work with the hearing impaired students and classroom teachers on a regular basis to meet the students' individual needs outlined on the IEP. IEP stands for Individualized Educational Plan. The hearing itinerant teacher may conduct observations, work one-on-one with students, work with small groups, tutor as needed, or push into classroom lessons. And I would honestly say that I do all of those things. There are several students who have IEP minutes, and I pull them out and work with them. There's many other students that I push in and just strictly observe. Sometimes I push in and work with whatever that student is doing at the time. I might just help them with it. I've definitely tutored or caught students up on past missing or late work. I probably would say I really don't often work with a small group unless that student is already working in a small group and I happen to enter the classroom and that's what they're doing. But I don't have a regular small group of kids that I work with. So yeah, I wear various different hats when I enter a different classroom. The next slide says, what is the role of a hearing itinerant teacher? An itinerant teacher fulfills many roles. A few key ones are listed below. I definitely make sure that my students have appropriate and adequate support services. Support services may include speech, OT, PT, things like that. I monitor language development. I monitor auditory training and use of auditory equipment. Many of my students use FM equipment. Some strictly just use a tower where there's a tower speaker that's planted in the center of their room. And it's really very simple. It just stays there all day long, and the student can only really benefit from it when they are in that classroom. Other students have FM equipment that travels throughout the building with them, so I definitely am the troubleshooter of the FM equipment a lot. Tutoring as needed. Formal and informal assessments for the purpose of the 3-year re-eval or annual review. So every 3 years we open up a domain meeting and we decide which areas we want to gather more information, and oftentimes I will administer different tests to the students or just simply want to look at their latest audiological evaluation. I might observe them and interview the parents or even interview the classroom teacher to gather some information for their 3-year re-eval, so that happens a lot. And of course, annual reviews, I'm always looking at their latest MAP scores or their grades, things like that, to decide what would appropriate goals be for the kids. I provide the students with independent skills necessary to succeed in the classroom. Very important to provide them with self-advocacy and compensatory skills so they know how to take care of their listening needs in the classroom. For instance, if they missed a page number, to know to raise their hand and say, what page did you say? Or if a teacher is talking to them with their back turned, ask them to turn around, things like that. Just make sure that they can advocate for their hearing loss. The next slide is a continuation. I provide students with coping strategies. That's kind of just what I described. Definitely a huge part of every fall, every August when I return to school, I must in-service the teachers and support staff. So it's not just the classroom teachers, but students, leave the classroom and definitely see art teachers and music teachers and OTs and PTs and things like that. And so I need to in-service teachers and support staff regarding the characteristics of hearing impairments, the use of FM equipment, and accommodations they may need. Common accommodations that I might write for a student would be preferential or flexible seating, gaining their attention prior to speaking, using visual cues, speaking in a loud, clear voice, repetition or rephrasing of directions, and a big one is repeating other student responses. Those would probably be my top accommodations that I write for students that have a hearing loss. I also definitely try to keep in contact with parents and teachers, and I monitor their educational progress. When they're a little bit older, I spy on them on my Power School, and I look up their grades all the time. When they're younger, I might just email their teacher and say what midterm grade are they getting right now, and what did they get on their latest MAP score. MAP is M-A-P, MAP score. So yes, email and phone calls very often. I definitely troubleshoot equipment on a regular basis, and I keep in touch with the educational audiologists regarding issues and testing. So I feel like I have them on my speed dial, the audiologists that my district works with. Whether it's they want to let me know that my student is going to see them after school and they want their FM equipment to go home with them, or if somebody had just recently today I spoke to one and they told me that a student's hearing aid is back from repair and I can come and pick it up for him, things like that. I'm always in touch with the audiologists. I may case manage students with either an IEP or a 504 plan. And I'm going to talk in more detail about what the difference between IEP and 504 plan is on my next slide. And so far I don't see any questions popping up under anybody's name, so hopefully I'm not talking too fast and everything makes sense. So my next slide, I'd just like to explain exactly what an IEP is, because I did mention that I have students on my caseload with an IEP and with 504 plans. So the IEP defined is Individualized Educational Plan. It's a plan or program developed to ensure that a child who has a disability identified under the law and is attending an elementary or secondary educational institution receives specialized instruction and related services. The child identified under the IEP receives more rights than a child identified under a 504 plan. The IEP is designed to help a child individually to reach his or her educational goals. It involves many things like developing objectives and goals for the students, helping the teachers in understanding the student's disability, and most importantly, choosing placement for the student in an educational environment which is the least restrictive for the student. So the IEP is under IDEA, so that's under special education. It's a little bit different than the 504 plan, which is, there we go, my next slide. The 504 plan is a civil right, and it can actually follow a student to their job and post-college. I just had 2 504 meetings today at school with a 10th grader and an 11th grader. The 11th grader has a job, and I made sure that the mom got an extra copy of the 504 paperwork because she can bring the accommodations to her job and receive those as her civil right. So the 504 plan is a plan developed to ensure that a child who has a disability identified under the law and is attending an elementary or secondary educational institution receives accommodations that will ensure their academic success and access to the learning environment. So a 504 plan and an IEP both have accommodations. A 504 plan doesn't have goals. So one is eligible for Section 504 after an evaluation, which is drawn from various sources. To be eligible under a 504 plan, the child should have a mental or physical impairment which impairs at least one life activity. And usually the categories you would be qualified under would be hearing or seeing, walking, breathing, speaking, reading, writing, learning, or caring for oneself, even math calculation performance and manual tasks. My school's paperwork has the word learning and working as separate ones. I see that on my list here I have learning, working issues. Maybe they have ADHD and hearing loss and they really have trouble working, focusing and working. I might check the working box, but you can have a 504 plan. I have specifically a nephew who has diabetes, and he has a 504 plan for his diabetes. So, you know, he needs to have a plan and accommodations in place when his diabetes needs, you know, tending to. So it doesn't always have to be like academic. It could be a health issue as well. So to explain a little bit further, my next slide, here are some subtle but important differences. Not all students who have disabilities require specialized instruction. For students with disabilities who do require specialized instruction, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, controls the procedural requirements and an IEP is developed. The IDEA process is more involved than that of a Section 504 plan of the Rehabilitation Act. I always tell parents that a 504 plan is less cumbersome than an IEP. That's always the word that I've used. The 504 plan requires documentation of measurable growth. For students with disabilities who do not require specialized instruction but need assurance that they will receive equal access to public education and services, the document's created to outline their specific accessibility requirements. It's really great if you have a student who just needs some accommodations of some sort. Students with 504 plans do not require specialized instruction, but like an IEP, a 504 plan should be updated annually and ensure that the student is receiving the most effective accommodations for his or her specific circumstances. So yes, an IEP has to be by law 1 year minus a day the following subsequent meeting. 504 plan is a little bit more flexible. It's even flexible like the sign-in page, for instance. You just initial. If you have somebody who was invited to the 504 meeting and they don't come, it's kind of not a big deal. You just don't put an initial next to their name. It's fine. The IEP is much more strict in the sense that if you've invited somebody and they're officially on the invitation and they cannot come, you need to get an excusal. You need a reason. The person has to speak to the parents. The 504 plan, as long as it's around a year, that's okay. The IEP really absolutely has to be less than a year. So if today I had an IEP meeting, it would have to be the 24th of January 2017 or before. It cannot go past a year. 504 plan is more lenient. So my next slide. Actually, before I speak about these hearing-related links, I'm not sure if you would want to hear about like a typical day for me, but I can tell you just about today, for example. There's actually an early childhood program in my district, and so within the early childhood program, there's actually a parent tot room, and today is a little special treat to them. I had volunteered to teach some of those younger kind of babies some sign language. So I had 2 sessions of teaching parents or caregivers some sign language, which was really exciting for me because actually none of the students on my caseload, all 33 that I see, I do not sign with any of them. And it's not because I'm just choosing not to sign with them. They don't know sign language. So for me to even lift up my hands and sign is kind of exciting because it seems rare to me that I even do get to use it when I'm in school. So I just taught some little baby sign language, 10 signs or so, to the caregivers, and then we did another session where I did some hands-on toys. We actually got some toys, and I showed them how I would teach a baby sign language. So that's actually very unusual. That's really not normally part of my day. I did that only one other time this year. I do spend a lot of time in my office and answering emails and doing paperwork. I have some upcoming 504 meetings, and I'm going to be preparing paperwork for those, as well as an IEP meeting coming up this Thursday for a third grader, so I was preparing some paperwork for him. I did drive to another school, saw a student just for 30 minutes, left that school, drove right back to my office. I did have this afternoon at the high school 2 504 meetings for a 10th grader and 11th grader. So it's kind of interesting starting my day with 3-year-olds, actually under 3. The kids were, they were months old, 14 months, 15 months, 2 years old, and then ending my day with bigger kids. So really have a variety of students. I often eat lunch at my desk while I'm doing paperwork or in the car, which is kind of sad in a way, but it's just kind of the way it is. I'm the only person with my job title in my entire district. I often get confused with the vision itinerants, and in case you were wondering, I do not know Braille. That's been a question I've been getting for dozens and dozens of years. Oh, do you know sign language? So then you must know Braille too. I don't know Braille. I never learned Braille. I know it's raised dots that equal letters, and that's about all I know. In college, you don't really go to your sign language class and then go next door to your Braille class if you're just a deaf ed major. So I often do get emails asking vision questions, because I think a lot of times people think vision and hearing maybe are the same people, but we're not. There are 3 vision itinerants in my district and just me, 1 hearing itinerant. So my schedule is usually kind of all over the place, but in a way it's nice. It's broken up. I spend times in various schools. Sometimes it's embarrassing when I enter a school and people say hi to me by name and I can't remember that one secretary's name because I'm only here once every other week and things like that. And but I really do love my job very much, and I used to think, who would want to be a hearing itinerant teacher? Who would want to travel in their car so much, and who would want to go from school to school and not have a place to call home? But I can't imagine going back to the self-contained world that I used to teach in, because I really, really do love the variety and helping various ages and visiting different schools and servicing various ages and things like that. So the next 2 slides, my last 2 slides pretty much, just have a whole bunch of hearing-related links. These are places that I might visit if I need some information, and just places that are deaf and hard of hearing related, whether it's Hands and Voices, IDHHC, Chicago Hearing Society is on there, Illinois School for the Deaf is on there. I added Phonak and Oticon. I combined those 2, Phonak and Oticon, 2 hearing aid dispensing companies. Those are probably the top 2 that I work with. I know there's others, but usually they don't make FM equipment, so I try to keep myself updated with hearing aid companies that also are FM friendly. Hearing loss samplers, interesting. Center on Deafness. Harris Communication is a great place if you need products. So there's various hearing-related links there that you can access at a later time. And my last slide, if this is something that is useful or interesting to you, here are some sign language links. If I'm ever looking up a sign, I will, I like ASL Pro and Signing Savvy because it will show me a 3D picture of somebody signing, which is much easier than looking at a 2-dimensional picture in a book. So these are just some great resources there. I guess I just have 1 slide left. I do want to share these cute pictures. I do like the one that says, I can't hear you if you cover your mouth, and I can't hear you if you don't face me. I found those to be very interesting, and I love sharing those. So I just stuck those last two pictures because I didn't know where else to put them on my Do You Have Any Questions page. So please feel free to ask me some questions. I see Kristen wants to know, how often do I meet with the teachers? So I guess it probably depends on how many minutes my student has. If I have a student that I see 3 times a week, I'm just thinking of a second grader who I push in twice a week and I pull her out once a week. So she has kind of higher minutes. I guess meeting with teachers, do you mean like formally sitting down and chatting with them, or just quickly getting an update? I mean, if you're saying that, do I quickly touch base and get updates, I do that all the time. When I push in, I'll constantly say, hey, how's it going, and anything going on. And if my student asks me a question, I might say, you know what, you need to ask your teacher, and we'll go up together and ask her teacher. So I feel like I'm constantly having FaceTime with all of my students' teachers. I'm just kind of always popping in and saying, hey, how's it going? I send emails all the time. To actually sit down and have a really long, like half-hour conversation, I probably wouldn't do that unless it was close to their IEP time, and I really wanted to kind of interview them about how they take care of their listening needs in the classroom. I would probably sit down and have a real formal meeting, but I have many, many weekly informal meetings with teachers as much as I can, even if it's to say, oh, the teacher might say they lost their clip, could you please get me a new one, and I'll get a new one and I'll show them how to put it on. And I really am just one of those people who tries to touch base often. So I hope that answered your question. Oh, you're welcome. I can't see what you just said, Carrie. It just went away.
This is Carrie. So I was just going to say, if you had any suggestions that if somebody was having a problem communicating or getting in touch with their teacher or hearing itinerant, what would you suggest for them to do?
So hopefully this parent isn't having trouble getting in touch with the teacher and the hearing itinerant, because that would be very sad. Let's just say they're having trouble getting in touch with the teacher. I would go to the hearing itinerant and ask the hearing itinerant to be the go-between. I've had that happen before, where parents feel like even when they're having trouble in school or they got a bad grade, they'll call me and tell me all about it, where I kind of think, why aren't you telling the classroom teacher? But they know that I'm going to get back to them right away, and they feel more comfortable talking with me or feel like a closer relationship with me. So they often use me as kind of a go-between. I'll never speak for the teacher, but I'll definitely share with the teacher that a parent is trying to get in touch with them. And if they want to tell me the answer and I can get back, I'm happy to be that middleman. I think that would kind of be terrible if the hearing itinerant and the teacher are both really challenging to get in touch with. If the hearing itinerant is not being responsive, I guess I would do the opposite and try to have the teacher should definitely have contact information. Hopefully that itinerant has made themselves well known and has introduced themselves and has left their contact information and visits that child often. I have to say that my 504 students, I probably don't see those teachers as often as the IEP students, because those 504 students don't have any minutes, and kind of as a courtesy, I pop in once maybe every quarter and observe them. So hopefully a 504 student, that hearing itinerant has also made themselves known and a way to get in touch with, but I guess I would go through the teacher to try to reach the hearing itinerant, but hopefully both aren't challenging. If that did happen, I guess I would call the assistant principal of that school, and I'm sure that they would make sure that that problem stopped right away. I hope that answered your question. Now I'm seeing more questions come up. How often do you meet? Someone's having a problem. Okay, during what grades do you feel that your students struggle the most with their hearing loss? Social, SM, acceptance. So for sure in junior high or middle school, it seems to me those are the kids who tell me, oh, I can hear just fine. Oh, I can hear all my teachers. Oh, I hear everything. I don't need my FM anymore. I can hear, I don't yet actually even need to wear my hearing aid anymore because I'm fine. I think it's just that puberty time where everybody's kind of thinking that kids are staring at them all day where really they're not. You know, it feels like everybody's staring at their ears when truly they probably don't even notice. But I feel like the turning point seems to be where the kids start telling me, you don't need to come anymore, I'm fine. You know, I can hear everything. I don't need to sit in the front. I can hear fine in the back. It feels like to me like 6th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That's where I seem to notice that the kids like get a little more embarrassed that I'm coming, things like that. And definitely not all. And it's some girls and some boys, so I can't say it's like, you know, one certain sex or not, but I feel like all my elementary students just kind of, I don't want to say do what I say, but they go along with it and they wear their equipment and they're pretty responsible and they, you know, we'll talk about it and things, but it's that junior high age where they just tell me they're fine and they don't need me anymore. That's where it seems to happen. I hope that answered your question. I don't see any other questions. Does anybody verbally want to ask me any more questions?
This is Carrie again. I guess what would be your best advocacy tip that you, or your number one advocacy tip that you have the kids to try to implement and do on their own?
I really don't like when kids can't hear their teachers and just blow it off. I love when I can get my students to raise their hand and just simply say, what did you say? And you know, I try to work on specific things like what page did you say, or what time did you say, or when is that test, or what chapter did you say? But even if they just raise their hand and say, can you say that again? Just advocate for their hearing loss, that I just didn't hear you, instead of pretending. I mean, there are also other strategies when you've missed something. You certainly can look at the page that your neighbor has turned to, and that's fine too. But just to have the students speak up would make me want to have a party, because I feel like they just feel like, well, I missed it, I'll just blow it off. And I always say to them, you know, even if it's a page number, it's important. So, you know, don't just let it go. You're going to run into people all throughout the rest of your life who say something that you just quite didn't hear, one word or one phrase or one whole sentence or whatever. Ask them to say it again. That would probably be the one top thing that comes to my mind that I would love the students to do more. Ask the teachers to say it again. Ask their friends to say it again. I was working on a little self-advocacy game recently, and one of the challenge card questions for a 3rd grader I was working with said, and I actually have it right near me, you're standing with your friends on the playground. One of them says, let's pretend we are blank, and then they run off. What do? I would love for my student to say, I run after the kid and ask them to say it again. You certainly can't play a game pretending you are blank and not know what it is. So I hope that answered your question, Carrie. I think just to get the kids to say, what did you say? And, you know, even even if taking baby steps where they just say, huh, or what, that even makes me happy, opposed to saying nothing. But then after I have relied on huh and what, then I try to work on what did you say? And then I try to work on what page did you say? So I hope that answered your question, Carrie.
Yes, thanks.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is incorporated in a typical day for me that I can share with you ladies. No, I tried to include everything that I would think you'd ever want to know. Does anybody have any last questions? Whether you type it or you say it? Does everybody understand the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan, and how an IEP, I would see those students longer because they actually have goals? 504 plan, they just have some accommodations that I occasionally monitor. Maybe I'll just say one last thing about that. You know, how would I decide if a student needed an IEP or they just needed a 504 plan? If a student is really pretty academically solid and has great grades and advocates for their hearing loss, and there's really no major concerns with the students, I might, you know, just put them on a 504 plan so they have some nice accommodations. If they are academically struggling a little bit, or they need some compensatory assistance, or there's some gaps in their learning somewhere, or their MAP scores or PARC scores or any kind of major test scores are very, very low, and they struggle in, for sure, the area of language, I would definitely write a goal for them and see them more often, and, you know, they would have minutes with me. So I actually have more students on my caseload that have 504 plans than I do IEPs. This is the first time that's ever happened. So, and then how I decide how many minutes I would see a student would depend on how many goals they have. If there are so many different areas of language that I need to work on with them, and I have written page after page after page of goals, I need to see them more often, because the number of minutes is directly related to how many goals they have. If they have one goal, I might be able to just see them once a week or maybe once every other week to work on that one goal. If they have a few different goals, definitely need to see them weekly. I mean, there's so many different variables, and it depends. Sometimes I share a goal with other service providers. For instance, this Thursday I have an IEP coming up, and I wrote a goal that the speech therapist will share with me, and the speech therapist wrote a goal that I will share with her. So sometimes the person who implements the goal might be just me. It might be me and speech. That's usually, I usually would only share, I probably wouldn't share a goal with a PT or an OT because we work on completely different things, but speech definitely overlaps things that I work on, and I overlap things that they work on very often. But I'm not going to work on, you know, typing skills or writing or sensory needs and things like that that an OT might work on, because that doesn't have a lot to do with the hearing loss so much. So I hope that makes sense. Any last questions or comments? I think there might be one last slide that Carrie put in. If you have any questions or comments related to the call or group events held by Illinois Hands and Voices, or you need some one-on-one support through Illinois Guide by Your Side, please contact Carrie Ballion. She's the program coordinator for Illinois Guide by Your Side. The phone number is 866-655-4588, and you can email gbys@choicesforparents.org.
This is Carrie. Thank you, Jill, so much for leading the presentation tonight. And this will be uploaded to the Illinois Sound Beginnings website at some point in the near future. But thank you all for being on the call. And again, thanks, Jill, for being our presenter.
Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. Thanks for your interest.